This is the SwansCast Extra, the number one Sydney Swans fans weekend preview podcast. In this week's episode, we preview the Swans' 8th round clash against the Bombers at the SCG on Friday night. We discuss selections, what we're looking forward to, matchups and key points, and give you the weekend forecast ahead. With me tonight is SwansCast regular Joshua Maher. Joshua, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolute pleasure. I always love showing up. You know that.
I do. Now, there is a little bit of a story behind tonight's podcast. We did have Stephen Park on as our guest originally earlier. We had quite a few technical difficulties setting it up. We eventually got it set up. We recorded an entire podcast, and then we hit the post-production stage, and the technical difficulties more than reared their ugly heads. So we've
let's tell it how it is. It sounded like he was phoning in from Afghanistan. It was that bad.
Yes, he is our literal Asian correspondent. But anyway, look, thank you so much, Stephen, earlier tonight for being on the show. Unfortunately, we can't put the audio on because it was extraordinarily difficult to listen to, but we'll have you on again soon. Now, top of the agenda for tonight's show, we've got a couple of things to discuss. We did a Sydney Swans fan interview during the week with Matt Jansen. It is a great listen. We talk about the fact that he's an LGBTI ambassador with the Sydney Swans. He's involved with a number of organisations outside of football, most noticeably the Jodie Lee Foundation, and he's the chair of the New South Wales Advisory Board for that. He is involved with some of the coterie groups with the Sydney Swans, the Bloodliners and the Centre Circle. And we talk a bit about his history with Sydney Swans, how he came to follow the Swans, his relationship with Andrew Pridham, and just him in general and his actions that he does on and off the field. It's a great listen. Encourage you to listen to it. It is on our Patreon page, but you can get access to it on all the social media channels, on our Wooshka, and you can also subscribe to it on iTunes. So check it out. Josh, I believe you've had a listen to it.
I did. I listened to it last night. It was well worth the 40-odd minutes. Just get on it, have a listen, and check out the other two interviews that we've done previously.
And the other thing to discuss tonight also is the New South Wales team of all time. So it's not team of the century, not team of the decade, but it is a combination of the greatest players to have represented New South Wales or be from New South Wales in all of VFL, AFL, WAFL, SANFL, etc., so forth history. And there are some pretty distinguished names on this list, Josh.
There's some very distinguished names on this list. There are 6 Swannies, which probably makes a certain amount of sense, seeing we were the only team, only AFL team, I guess, in New South Wales for a long period of time. There are a few people, I think, who are going to surprise people in that most people aren't going to know they came from New South Wales.
Yeah, look, I had a look at this list earlier, and on the previously recorded podcast, and I'm still surprised by it. I honestly was surprised to find out that Tom Hawkins is from New South Wales. Paul Kelly, he's from New South Wales, revered Sydney Swans champion and New South Wales champion of football, which is superb. The Danahers, they're all from New South Wales. But the one thing that I really picked up on was the fact that there's a very strong Hawthorn contingent within that list, certainly from the last 20 years. Your Shane Crawfords, your Isaac Smiths, your Luke Bruce as well. And look, Shane Crawford, Hall of Famer guaranteed if he isn't already. And Isaac Smith and Luke Bruce will probably be Hawthorn Hall of Famers. Certainly Luke Bruce, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, that's right. And I think too that if people have a look at the list and they know the history of the Swans, especially in the early days up in the 83 through to sort of like 94, they're going to spot a few names on that list that could have been Swans legends instead. That the ability to be able to draft them was sort of given away to help with the financial situation of the club.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the Johnny Long Myers and the, Wayne Carey and that sort of stuff. The one that stood out for me, which I didn't know about, I didn't know that Hayden Bunton was from Albury.
Well, there you go. And the captain, of course, is Wayne Carey. So I myself was probably a little bit surprised by this. I would have thought Paul Kelly would have been named captain, but Wayne Carey is one of the greatest AFL players of all time. And he is from New South Wales, so New South Wales has been represented by some pretty damn good football players, Josh.
There are 2 current Swans in that team who are still playing for the club, and that being Kieran Jack and Jared McVeigh. It's
pretty amazing that there are 4, in the initial 22, there are 4 current players on AFL lists still playing AFL. And then there's Dane Rampy has been named as an emergency. I'm not entirely sure what the emergency list, but Dane Rampy is in the emergency list. So it really is amazing that 5 current players are in the New South Wales team of all time. So that is that's great for those players, but also reflects just how good they are compared to the other New South Wales players.
Yep. Yep, outstanding effort. And they've all had good, distinguished careers as well.
Yeah, they certainly have. Team changes. So we've had quite a few changes over the recent weeks, 3s and 4s and 2s. This week it's just the one. It's a forced change. Colin O'Riordan, he comes in for Harry Cunningham, who blew up his groin, strained his adductor on the weekend in a similar incident to Jared McVeigh. So it was almost relatively the same position on the field. Different field, obviously, but same position, same action, kicked the ball, went down, and that was Harry Cunningham, and he's ruled out for 8 weeks, Josh.
Yeah, it's they initially said 4 to 6, and now they're saying 6 to 8. I mean, it's a good like-for-like type replacement, I guess. The only thing I would have liked to see was that I would have liked to see O'Riordan in a couple of weeks ago. But, he's been smashing it in the resis. He's been averaging sort of 40 disposals a week. Last week he had 41 at 80%, I believe. And despite the fact he's missed 2 of the reserves games this year, he's well ahead of the pack as far as fantasy ranking points for the NEFL goes this year. So he's having an outstanding year, and hopefully he can transition some of that across to the senior team.
Yeah, he has been superb in the NEFL, and he was arguably the player of the match on the weekend despite losing to Brisbane. He was superb. He was probably a bit stiff to be dropped in the first place off the back of 2 50-metre penalties and a bit of indiscretion in defence, but he was certainly far from our worst in that match. And I do recall talking to you about this and on subsequent podcasts about this particular individual and the fact that he was, I felt, and I think you can agree on this one, pretty hard done by to be dropped in the first place.
Yeah, I thought he was too. So hopefully he can take this one by the scruff of the neck and stay in the team. And hopefully we don't take this, this 2016 Australian Cricket Australia view where we just sort of start rotating random players around and just get some consistency with the best 22 that we got on the park.
Yeah, we've got a squad of about 40 players, but we don't need to institute any kind of rotational policy if we don't need to.
God, no.
God,
no. Let's just...
Well, that leads us into
and I always like the fact that we got an Irish guy in the back. Whenever we have an Irish guy down back, I feel a little bit more certain because, I don't know, I like having an Irish guy down back.
They seem to make pretty good defenders. I mean, Essendon have had one. They got the Irish fellow Conor McKenna. He has been a pretty good player for them. Brisbane had one. I can't quite recall Brisbane's player, but he was quite good for quite a long time as well.
Yep. So, well, hopefully he brings it. I hope he brings that NEFL form he's had and brings it across because he's had an outstanding couple of weeks.
Yeah, he certainly has. Look, that leads us into our social question as well. So we put a question out onto social media, and the question was, with the list going through a transformative stage, should we be giving players who are on the cusp a red-hot go in the scene team? Players like Rose, Fox and O'Riordan regularly find themselves in the NEFL best, yet rarely play AFL. So we had Peter from Twitter, Josh. He said they should be given a 5-game block each to see if they can take the next step. If they can't, cut them at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair comment. I think one of the things that we've talked about recently is that guys, the step up from NEFL to AFL obviously being so much higher than the step up, from, say, VFL to AFL, and that you can't expect them just to come in and have an instant impact. Yeah, sure, we've had players who... are bordering on being generational talents like your Heaney's and your Tom Mitchells. Tom Mitchell's genuinely a generational talent.
Yeah.
And they're an exception, I guess. But for those guys who are not generational talents, they need to come in and they need to have several games to find their feet, and then you can make a decision. I really do not like this situation where we've got where we have them come in and they play 1 or 2 games and then we take them straight back out again. There is no consistency in that whatsoever.
Yeah, and it's like we can talk about Brandon Jack and James Rose all day. We can also refer back to Fox and the Towers and the Robinsons and the Foots and the Hiscoxes and some players who didn't deserve it, some players who should have got more of an opportunity. O'Riordan is one who should have had more opportunity by now, and he's finally getting another chance. Darcy Cameron played 1 game. They played him for about 30 minutes, and that was it. So there are a lot of players in the reserves that you kind of scratch your head and you go, well, the senior team kind of needs a player like that. We have that kind of player. Why aren't we playing him? And we do. We bring him in and then we drop him. So,
and I guess the thing is too is that you have to bring them back in if you bring them into the seniors, you have to bring them into their natural position. So,
Yes.
I'm glad you brought up Brandon Jack because he would play predominantly midfield in the reserves and was
Same with
racking up
Rose,
very
yeah.
good numbers. Same with Rose, racking up very good numbers in his last year before he was delisted. But we bring him in the senior team, stick him down the forward pocket, and then we'd go, oh, he didn't perform, and we take him straight back out.
Exactly, and it's the same with Jordan Dawson as well. Jordan Dawson sort of changed or remodeled his game under Reece Shaw from a high half forward into more of a midfield ball-winning machine. He came into the senior team and he was played in about 6 different positions, and he didn't look good in either of them. Earlier this year, I honestly thought if he continued the way he was playing, he was going to get cut, like guaranteed to get cut. And they finally gave him a chance to play in the midfield. And what happened? He had a good
He's
game.
playing his natural position. He's doing very well, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, look, it's got to play players where they've got to play. And, look, Luke from Facebook, he touches on this one as well, Josh. He says, Of course, they never really get more than one game, and it's near impossible adjustment. Fox had the game-high sprint efforts last week. He worked his ass off to get to contests, and it just didn't fall his way. We need to get, he says, 20 to 40 games. I'm not necessarily sure about the 20 to 40 games into these guys before we can make a call on whether they're up to it or not.
Yeah, I think 20 to 40 is probably a little bit excessive, but certainly by the sort of the 8 to 10 game mark, I think you've got a general look at where they're going to end up, and that should be enough. But certainly not, and that's 8 consecutive as well. It's not bringing them in for one, taking them out, bring them back, 5 weeks later for 2 games, take them back out, bring them back the next season for another 2 games, take them back out. They need a block.
I mean, you just look at them. You just go back at last year and the year before. You look at players like Fox. They had 2 games here and there, but they were like 12 rounds in between. It's just crazy, the chopping and changing. I was quite disappointed that McInerney didn't get a second game. I thought he deserves a second game, basically because of the way he was treated in the first game. But look, I digress. Nick from Facebook, Josh, he says, #play the kids for Raul.
Look, I think we should make a play for him regardless, but I certainly don't advocate playing the kids to ensure losing, I guess is the best way to put it.
So we're not trying to be a Melbourne circa 2006 or something?
No, look, I mean that goes to issues of integrity then, and it's a messy field that nobody ever wants to be involved with. Put your best 22 on the park each week, try and develop what you've got, and just see what you've got at the end of the year. But if you finish 12th or you finish 10th, or God forbid you finish in the top 8, Raul is a generational talent. He's been compared to people like Paul Kelly. Take whatever you've got and then work the draft and try and get in a position to draft him, because that is actually, he's the kind of player we need in our midfield right now.
Yep.
Nathan from Facebook, probably a good season to rotate all our younger players through seniors if it's managed correctly. And that's basically what we were talking about earlier, and probably what we said in the review podcast earlier this week as well.
Yeah, exactly. As long as we've got a bit of control over it, or there's a bit of direction over it, and there's there's a reason to rotate them. As we said earlier, we don't want to rotate the whole squad. There's no point, because no one's ever really going to get any consistency. So,
no, that's right. Take the saucepans from Instagram. A lot of the guys in the NEAFL just can't make the step up to AFL level.
Yeah,
that's kind of true. But we don't. I just don't think we give them enough of a chance to make that step up either. So we probably do them a bit of a disservice, and we may have made some wrong list management decisions in the past by not giving them a fair crack. And lastly, Adam from Facebook. If form warrants a game, then yes, they should be playing seniors and be getting a couple of consecutive games to settle into the team. And that's sort of more of what we've been saying the last couple of weeks as well.
Yeah, exactly. And look, just so that people, I don't know if they watch an NEAFL or not, but just in case you don't, a lot of the players in an NEAFL are basically academy or just local league footballers. And we're talking a lot of players 21 years and younger. So we don't have that senior, the older brigade in the reserves that we had a few years ago. Like we had Ted Richards in there. We had Jeremy Laidler in there who was coaching and playing at the same time. We don't have that anymore. The oldest player in the NEAFL, I think, was Fox and Darcy Cameron, and they're 25, 26 years old. So we are lacking that sort of experience and leadership in the NEAFL at the moment.
Yeah, that the same sort of depth issues that are affecting the senior team also affect the reserves team, and I think that's I think that's the case for pretty much every AFL team. Rowan Connolly actually said in one of his podcasts last year that you always know when a senior team is doing really well because the fans of that club are not only talking about how good the AFL listed team is, but how good their reserves team is as well. And it's not mutually exclusive, but there's certainly a relationship between the depth of your reserves team and the depth of your senior team.
Yeah, and Richmond in 2017 is probably the best example of that. They had a lot of really good players in their reserves team that just couldn't get in at all. We've had very strong NAFL teams. And, God, don't even ask me about the grand finals. We somehow cannot win a grand final despite absolutely dominating the seasons. This is your host, Justin Mitchell. Got to get the Thank you so much for listening to the latest episode of the SwansCast Extra. It might be that we have to get some players who are please leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify, Wishco, or any other source that you like to listen to the podcast on. Get the kids a bit more. Thanks for listening, and on with the show. A bit more expertise and help develop their skills.
Yep. Potentially. Yep, absolutely.
Now, Player of the Year votes time. So we do our own Player of the Year after the match, or we give them out on the review podcast. We had Hewitt as 5, Papley 4, Aaliyah 3, Kennedy 2, and I can't quite remember who we gave the 1 to. I think it was Kennedy, maybe. So we put it to the fans to put in their Player of the Year votes, and we've got the votes back, Josh, and they're quite unanimous. The 5 votes, Tom Papley, and he got it by a very, very big margin in the end. I think it was more than double what 4 got. And 4 votes goes to Josh Kennedy, 3 votes to George Hewitt, and 2 votes to Aaliyah, and they were all separated by 1 vote. Across everyone who voted, 1 vote was the difference for those 3 players. It was pretty amazing. And Will Hayward rounds out our top 5 for votes from the fans. So thank you everyone who voted. We'll give you the leaderboard later on in the week, but we'll put up the next one after our match, and you'll have your chance to vote again for your Player of the Year for round 8 next week.
Yeah, it's a pretty well rounded out sort of list, isn't it? Tommy Papley, I understand why he's there. He had a great game. He got poleaxed. He's a tough little bugger. He got back up. Kennedy's stringing some form together. I thought, I would have had Georgie Hewitt higher than that. I think Hewitt was definitely our best player for the game. And Aaliyah had a pretty solid game down back with his 15 intercept possessions. And for a bloke who hadn't played for a few weeks because of his broken jaw, Will Hayward had a pretty good impact on his return. So it's a pretty well-rounded out list. His
second quarter was really, really impressive for a guy who's not that old and had his jaw broken only a couple of weeks earlier. All right, we'll be right back after this very quick break. Stay tuned. Look, I wish this was maybe even last year we were previewing the round 8 match, Josh, because the Swans are not doing too well this year, unfortunately.
No, we're not. For lots of reasons we've already discussed, and I think we'll just have a look at the numbers and see where we fit in.
Look, we're not going to torture ourselves too much with the numbers because it's a bit like the drip treatment or the waterboarding at the moment, because the Swans, they're kind of bottom ranked for a lot of stats. It's quite stunning, the fall they've had. But most importantly, they're ranked 18th for inside 50 differential, 18th for contested football differential, and 17th for one-on-one wins, which is, it really does indicate and reflect how the team has performed over the year and really where they're at the moment, and possibly what they're trying to transition into, which is more the Hawthorn style of uncontested control game with a bit of slingshot would be nice.
Yeah, and it really just shows just how much we're getting beaten around the ball and around the contest at the moment, and everything else. Every other deficiency we've got at the moment flows from that. We won't get into that too much, I guess, because we've flogged that to death the last couple of weeks. But the numbers are what they are.
Yeah, they certainly are.
So the history between the two teams, the Swannies have won 10 from the last 12 games. We've won the last 6 at the SCG since 2010 against the Bombers, which includes that ridiculous game with Gary Rowan.
If only we still had Gary Rowan. Oh man,
Oh,
we don't
look,
need to
we had
go
that
on
game.
that topic, unfortunately.
No. Oh, look, we had that game won. We lost it. We won it. We lost it again. And then we had the miraculous comeback.
Yep. Before we move on,
I mean,
there must be something about Sydney Swans playing Essendon Bombers and 7-goal leads. There just has to be. Because we've blown so many against them. So I put on a Throwback Thursday video on Facebook where we were up by 8 goals at one point against Essendon, and they almost had the greatest ever final quarter comeback and one of the top 10 comebacks of all time VFL AFL history. And it was just Courtney Dempsey playing on with half a second left.
Yes.
That was the only difference.
I had actually forgotten about that game until you put that video up today, and once again, having known the outcome, I was still nervous watching it. And I guess you could flip it over. What year was it where we played the Bombers at Olympic Park there in Sydney, and we played absolutely dreadful for the first 3 quarters, and then had that amazing comeback, come from behind win in the fourth?
Oh, I think that was
Was that 2015?
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure, but the other one that comes to mind is the one when Adam Goods had the chance to win it around about the siren and he just couldn't get it done.
Yeah, yep.
And I think that's in that same 2010 to 2013, 14 range.
Yeah, I think the one I'm talking about is 2015 because I think that was Heaney's debut year, wasn't it?
Yeah, it might be. I'm a bit foggy on games at ANZ.
Yes, but I mean, the point is that we have a little bit of history with the Bombers.
We do.
So it could be a very interesting game. The last time we played the Bombers, Essendon won with 15 goals and 19 behinds. 109, Sydney 10-6, 66. So, I mean, that's still the score we're racking up at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, it very much is. And look, we haven't scored 100 since round 17 last year. And I put in the match preview, and I was quite shocked when I found out what it is. I think we're averaging 73 points for at the SCG and 103 points against.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
Stats last time we played, we were negative 18 tackles, 65 to 47, negative 52 disposal, 378 to 326, negative 33 inside 50s. Oh my goodness.
What a surprise.
72 to 39. We actually equaled them in clearances.
Yep.
Negative 15 contested possessions, 156 to 141. I suspect that will probably continue this week.
Yeah.
And negative 21 1%ers, which is a huge, huge disparity.
It's hard to believe that was nearly a year ago and we're still producing the same numbers.
Yeah, that's true.
The writing was on the wall when we came out of the bye and we came out so sluggish. But we had those 4 wins in a row that were just... we pulled them out of nowhere, really.
Yep.
But since then, the form's basically been exactly where it was back around 15 last year. Just right at the bottom.
Yep, and there's no surprises. I mean, we've talked about it relentlessly. There's no secrets as to why that's occurring, but it is what it is, and that's the price we pay for being that rebuilding / developing team that we've finally admitted that we are.
Yeah, exactly. Look, matchups. I'll kick it off. I've got Rampy and Stringer. So, look, Stringer's a beast. He is a potential match winner. His form wavers. It can be up and down. As a forward, he can have very little impact to game-winning impact in a quarter or throughout a game. He might only have 8 possessions, but he could kick 6 goals. That's how good of a player he is. And even when he has been down in the past, he's gone into the midfield for 20, 30 minutes and just absolutely destroyed it and won the ball. And he's had the ball on a string at times. Performances against Collingwood in particular, he was superb against Collingwood. And in the first half, he was the only player scoring, which kind of brings me back to that game that we played Hawthorn in 2017, I think it was. And Franklin was our only goal scorer. So it's kind of similar to that, that kind of level of performance. And last week, he was also really impressive. So, look, he is a good player, proven game winner. Rampy's the only matchup I think we got.
He's starting to really show some of that form he had the year that he was All-Australian, and
back in 2016.
He didn't show it last year.
No.
Yeah, he was pretty selfish last year. He was sort of hanging around trying to get cheap ball out the back of the contest, but he's really presenting the kind of target that the Bombers want. And, they've sorted out his off-field issues and he's come good for them. So he's been a real good pickup for him. Yeah.
Look, Joshua, your matchup, please.
Yeah, look, I've gone a little bit different this week. I've actually gone to the coach's box, and it's not like I don't present it as a direct matchup, but I think that between Woosher and Longmire, there's 2 really contrasting philosophies on how things are going at the moment. So Woosher's guys their structure sort of seems to be to have no structure at times. They're really attacking. They play on a lot of instinct. They move the ball really quickly, and that's what makes them so dangerous. Whereas our Longmire's sort of more defensive game plan seems to have a lot more structure around it. We sort of put a lot more emphasis on defence than the Bombers do, and it sort of impacts our ability to be able to move the ball off the half-back line. So for me, I think just the matchup is probably more the philosophies that come out of the coach's box than anything. And I'll be interested to see how one works on curtailing the other one this week.
Well, it's a good point, because when teams have actually put some effort into restricting Essendon, they've really struggled to not just win the ball and move the ball, but keep the ball. They've butchered it something fierce. But as soon as they get it on their terms, they are like impossible to stop. So
yeah, their run off halfback is something amazing, and I really wished we had a crack at landing Sard when he came out of Gold Coast. I think he's that kind of attacking player that we could use. Sort of like Jones, but if Jones could actually kick a ball,
look,
if you know what I mean. But
Scott Pendlebury was the only reason Essendon didn't win that match, and Scott Pendlebury played one of his career best games. He was phenomenal. If he wasn't playing, Essendon win that game by about probably 6 goals, to be honest.
Look, if we could actually sort out our business around the contest and we could actually get numbers to the contest, I think we've got a fair crack at actually going even with these guys, because they don't defend well. Their mids don't run in defence as much as they should, and I don't think they like pressure either. So I think if you could restrict them to 80 points, I think we would have a fair shot, but you got to do it. And I'm sort of flaky on whether we can actually do that given the last few weeks.
Well, if you have a look at the team versus team stats, and the only real way to do it these days is through the AFL app. They've kind of changed their Stats Pro, and it's not a very good system. But in the AFL app, you can do a team, and then you can look at all the key statistical categories that there are. Sydney are actually above Essendon in about 70% of them. Granted, they're not at like the top 4 ranked. They're actually like 10th and 12th and 8th and 14th and stuff like that. So it's not like they're really rated elite or even above average. But you're right, Essendon really struggle in some of those key defensive areas, which really, I think, leads us into our key points. So can you give us your first key point?
Yeah, look, mine was just fast ball movement, and that is that we don't want to get caught. If we can win the contest, we don't want to get caught flat-footed in the contest with the ball, because they will hammer you and you will turn it over, and then their speed, the way they break from stoppages and the way they break off their half-back line is just something to behold. So fast ball movement, control it, get it up the field, and don't overuse it by hand, I guess, is my big thing. And if we do that, I think we could go a long way to beating them, because you can always kick and you can always handball faster than you can run. And if we can do that, we can take their leg speed out of it a bit.
Yeah, exactly. And that leads into my key point as well. Mine's very similar in that when we get the ball on the outside, we have to control it. We have to maintain possession. We have to retain the ball. That's the biggest problem we've had over the last 5-6 weeks, is when we get the ball, we butcher it and we just turn it over. Like we literally gift it to the opposition. And while we aren't at the top for turnovers, we're not that far off either. Our score from turnovers this season has been astronomical compared to recent seasons, so it's something we really need to tidy up. Predictions, Josh?
Phenomenally bad from turnover.
Yeah, it is.
I actually... Mine's a little bit pessimistic, actually. I actually think we are in with... you're always in with a chance to win a game, right? Just some chances are probably better than others. So I think we're either going to win this by 10 or we're going to lose it by 50. That's just my gut feeling. So my prediction that on the balance of things, I'd say that we're probably more likely to lose than win. And if we do, obviously it's going to be our worst SCG form since the dark days of 1994. Yeah,
and it's not looking great. I mean, we're equal with 2017 and 1994, but if we lose another one, we're equal with 1994. We actually have to lose a lot more after that to even break our worst, which is 93 and 92, and those were 1 and 2 win seasons. So
I'll tell you what, though, if saying that Essendon are probably going to win brings out a bit of reverse psychology and we thump the crap out of them, I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to complain at all.
Love it. I'll cheer on louder than anyone else.
Smile and open another beer. Smile and open another beer.
My prediction is Jake Stringer, the package, will kick 4 goals, and I reckon 3 of them will be in the third term. So my guess is the game will be tight and contested up until halftime, as it has been in recent weeks, and then the Bombers will just go bang after halftime and blow us out with probably like a 7-goal third quarter.
It's probably a fair comment. Yeah, I think that's probably a fair comment.
The weekend forecast, we've got our sure thing, most at stake, and doomsday scenario. We've got one each, so I'll kick things off. My sure thing for the weekend is the Swans. They will lose the contested possession, inside 50, and tackle count. We've been quite dire on those statistics all season, so I think that's pretty safe to lock in, Josh.
I was going to say, mate, that's a little bit of weak sauce because we lose that pretty much every week for the last 2 months.
Hey, it's a sure thing category. That's almost as sure as it gets.
Yeah, righto, fair enough. Well, in that case, mine's even weaker sauce because my sure thing is that Sam Reid will be behind the ball in the back six halfway through the first quarter.
Oh, halfway. Okay, let's take a bit of a bet on minute marks. I'm going like 5 minutes. What are you saying?
I'm saying at the 8-minute mark, he will be behind the ball.
It was 10 minutes last week, so you're in with a chance there. My most at stake is the same player, Sam Reid. Oh, God. Look, his form hasn't been good. He came off quite a long injury layoff. He did his quad and his Achilles last year. He had 2 surgeries, so, there's a very long injury layoff. He's played 1 season out of 3. I think he's only played 30 games in the last 3 or 4 years, so he's played basically as many games as Naismith has in the same period of time. It's really been that bad. But his form at the moment...
And in that time,
it's terrible.
We can't decide what he is. Like, is he a forward? Is he a ruck forward? Is he a forward ruck? Is he a defender? Like, I mean, at some stage, they're just going to have to decide what they want out of him.
Yeah.
And just play him in that position.
But he looks better as a ruck than a forward. And he's always looked distinctly ordinary as a ruck. Like, shouldn't even be in the ruck.
Yeah. Yep.
So, my most at stake is Sam Reid. We don't have anyone to replace him, but Jesus, I mean, he needs to lift.
Yeah, he does. It's almost like I always felt that he was a confidence player.
Yeah.
I mean, he needs to, or the club or something needs to happen with Reid at the moment. I'm not saying just send him to the twos because I don't think that's going to fix whatever ails him. But just he needs to lift. We need a lot more out of him than what we're getting.
Now, your most at stake, Josh?
Kieran Jack, Kizza. Look, we spoke a lot over the last couple of weeks about his inclusion in the team. It's still hard to decide whether it's just a form issue or he is injured again. His first senior game of the year was actually very good. He had a poor week the week after. Then he went out with a hip injury. So the only assumption is it's the same hip injury he's been carrying for a couple of years. He's come back in. He's been fairly ordinary. He had 8 disposals at 50% last week, which is just not good enough. But I think seniority is the only thing that's keeping him in the team at the moment. So he needs to have a big game and he needs to do a lot better than what he has been. So for him to break even for Kieran Jack this week, we need like a 15 disposal at 70% and 5 tackles and a goal or something. He needs to have a pretty big game.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether or not the team's going to be able to carry him for much longer because one of the most common responses from our social question today was we shouldn't be carrying him and we need him in there for his leadership, but at the same time he needs to lift and needs to perform. And you can't really have a player in the senior team who's playing 65-70% game time and only has 8 possessions.
No, and I understand the leadership angle, and I certainly subscribed to that a couple of weeks ago, but someone pointed out to me today that our 3 captains are still on the park.
Yeah, exactly.
So if our 3 captains can't do the leadership side of things...
then we've got the wrong 3 players.
Then we've got the wrong 3 players as captains, yep.
Yeah, so that's a topic for another time, I'm afraid. Doomsday scenario, for me, it's Swans crowd dips below 30k. So, yeah, once it hits that 30k mark,
close. We were only 30,600 last time at the SCG, weren't we?
But the thing is, it's a bit of a magical number, the 30k. Once they're above 30k, they're making the money. Once it gets below 30k, they start losing money. And I think once it
that's right.
consistently drops below 30k, you're looking at your 27, kind of alarm bells, 25, not quite red alert, but anything under that's red alert, and that's when they're really starting to lose money.
Yeah, and the Swans are obviously onto that at the moment. There's been a pretty big push on social media and other platforms this week to try and get the crowds up. There's been
the 10 tickets for
robot-
$300 and all sorts of
the
shenanigans.
$50 food voucher, which wouldn't get you 2 beers and a cold pie, and the automated calls apparently from John Longmire. It's sort of
They gave away free tickets
Well,
they gave away free tickets to the last home game as well.
Yeah, it's worrying signs when you're at round 7 or 8 or whatever we're at, and we're talking about telemarketing type strategies to try and get people through the gate already. So,
well, I don't know if
it's not just fickle fans.
No, it's not fickle fans, but I don't know if you're on Twitter. There's been a couple of odd photograph opportunities and certainly events that the Sydney Swans membership team have done in public recently. They went to one of the membership ceremonies and they gave away free tickets to new citizens who just passed their citizenship ceremonies. Then they were on the street today just giving free tickets away to random people.
Yep.
So
yeah, look at and like I don't want to make it sound like it's just because the fans are fickle, because it's not quite that simple. Like there's a whole bunch of other issues with SCG accessibility and cost, and let's face it, the food at the SCG is probably worse than Marvel, and it's not.
And it's more expensive.
It's not an easy place to get to spend your money, and it's expensive. So it's it's not like the it's not like the MCG. You just can't duck into the city, and then when you finish going into the city, you have to allow a significant amount of time and money to do an SCG game.
Yeah.
And we discussed earlier today actually about you can't even actually do a day trip to Sydney and back.
Not anymore, no.
Because of the curfews out of Sydney Airport. No. So the SCG has accessibility issues.
Yeah, it does. Now, your doomsday scenario, Josh?
Can I just say that I absolutely hate the bullflogs. I absolutely hate the bullflogs.
Hashtag bullflogs. I can't
stand them, and I'm on the bandwagon. Hashtag bullflogs, but like you, I'm on the bandwagon.
Oh, you're not on the Bulldogs bandwagon, are you?
Fuck no. Oh, sorry.
I think we just lost our E rating there.
Fuck no. God, no. I'm on the Lions bandwagon, mate. Hashtag Lions.
Hashtag Lions blog?
Look, I mean, hashtag Lions blog. Look, I'm on the bandwagon for the Lions at the moment, and I hate the Bullflogs. So my doomsday is that the Dogs get up and win that game. I want them to die. I hate them. Yep.
Yeah, they had a bit of a stirring win last week, which was a bit of a surprise. Richmond,
completely worked my footy tipping.
Yeah, I reckon they would have ruined it for most people. Richmond getting their asses handed to them, but I enjoy that result. I don't really like Western Bulldogs, but watching Richmond get flogged is always a pleasure of mine. Even when they sucked, it was always a pleasure. But look, Josh, it has been great having you on again. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I love it. I always like showing up.
No, love having you on. Our next episode will be on Sunday. We'll be reviewing the Essendon match, which is tomorrow night at the SCG at 7:50. Tune in on Fox 504 and Channel 778 in your regions. Check our match preview for the broadcast guide. You can get in contact with us on all of our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter using the tag The Swans Blog. We'll also respond to you on the hashtags SwansCast, SwansCast Extra, and our new hashtag SwansCast Fans for our fan interviews. Get onto that. It is superb. Until next time, go Swans.
Up the Swans.